Hare Krishna. So I'd like to invite you to recite with me the invocatory prayers, which is on the screen. Narayanam namaskritya naram cheva narottamam devim sarasvatim vyasam tato jayam udirayet. Before reciting this Srimad Bhagavatam, which is the very means of conquest, one should offer respectful obeisances unto the personality of Godhead, Narayan, and to Narayan Rishi, the supermost human being, and to Mother Saraswati, the goddess of learning, and unto Srila Vyasadeva, the author. So, in today's class, which is on Canto 1, Chapter 1, Text 21, the main theme of the class is the importance of hearing and speaking Bhagavatam, of actively hearing, of participating, and not just passively hearing Bhagavatam, as being the main engine that drives our spiritual advancement. So, in the mood of the class, I'd like to invite you to please pause the video frequently and read the evidences or read the purport yourself, and do your own understanding of what Prabhupada is saying. And sometimes if you found some way that I've understood it useful, then reflect back what I've understood. But be a very active hearer, always reflecting back and participating. So the class is on Canto 1, Chapter 1, Text 21, and I'd like to invite you to please recite the shloka, the verse, with me. At every stage, every slide, please use speaker 2. Kalim agatam agyaya shetresmin vaishnave vayam asina dirga satrena katayam sakshana hare. Kalim, the age of Kali, iron age of quarrel. Agatam, having arrived. Agyaya, knowing this. Kshetre, in this tract of land. Asmin, in this. Vaishnave, specially meant for the devotee of the Lord. Vayam, we. Asina, seated. Dirga, prolonged. Satrena, for performance of sacrifices. Katayam, in the words of. Sakshana, with time at our disposal. Hare, of the personality of Godhead. So translation: knowing well that the age of Kali has already begun, we are assembled here in this holy place to hear at great length the transcendental message of Godhead, and in this way perform sacrifice. So I'd just like to explain a little bit about the verse, who's speaking the verse. This is the sages themselves speaking. It's not specified whether it's their spokesman, Shaunaka, speaking on their behalf, or whether the 60,000 sages who had assembled in Naimisaranya over 5,000 years ago, whether they all spoke in one voice, we're not sure, but whether it's being spoken on their behalf or by them collectively, this is the sages, the rishis speaking. And they're telling Sutta, to whom they're speaking to, that we know that the age of Kali has begun. Now, according to the Vedas, history is divided into 4 millennium, just like a year is divided into 4 seasons, spring, summer, autumn and winter. Similarly, the history of the universe is divided into 4 millennium or ages. These are known as Satya Yuga, which is in this purport, Prabhupada will compare it to the golden age, the most pure age. Sometimes he compares it to the spring. And then is Treta Yuga, which in this purport we'll see Prabhupada will compare to the silver age, and Prabhupada in other places he compares it to the summer. Dwapara Yuga, which in this purport Prabhupada will compare to copper, the copper age, and in other places he compares to the autumn. And Kali Yuga, the age we currently live in, which is compared to iron, the Iron Age or the winter. And this age is characterized by quarrel and hypocrisy. So the sages are telling Sutta that we know that this Iron Age of quarrel and hypocrisy, Kali Yuga, has already started. The trouble has already started. And that's why we're here. We've come here to this holy place. They're referring to Naimisaranya as a holy place. We've come here to this holy place to perform 1,000-year, well, actually it doesn't say it here, to perform a sacrifice by hearing and reciting the messages of Godhead, of the Supreme Lord. So that's their sacrifice. And they're doing this specifically because they know the Kali Yuga has begun. This is their impetus. So if we go to the purport, please read the purport with me. This age of Kali is not at all suitable for self-realization by the methods practiced in Satya Yuga, the Golden Age, or Treta or Dwapara Yugas, the Silver and Copper Ages. So we're going to read a little bit of the purport and then we'll summarize what we've understood. For self-realization, please read the next slide. For self-realization, the people in Satya Yuga, living a lifetime of 100,000 years, were able to perform prolonged meditation. And in Treta Yuga, when the duration of life was 10,000 years, self-realization was attained by performance of great sacrifice. And in the Dwapara Yuga, when the duration of life was 1,000 years, self-realization was attained by worship of the Lord. Next slide. But in the Kali Yuga, the maximum duration of life being 100 years only, and that combined with various difficulties, the recommended process of self-realization is that of hearing and chanting of the holy name, fame, and pastimes of the Lord. So I've done a chart here which summarizes everything that we've just read. So at the top we have the different categories. Yuga, what is Yuga? The life expectancy, method of self-realization, and is this method approved for us? So you can give the answers with me. In Satya Yuga, what did Prabhupada say is the life expectancy? 100,000 years. What did he say is the method of self-realization? Meditation. Did he say that this method is approved for us in this age that we're living in? No. In Treta Yuga, what is the life expectancy? 10,000 years. What is the method of self-realization? Sacrifice. Is this method approved for us in Kali Yuga? No. In Dwapara Yuga, what is the life expectancy? 1,000 years. What is the method of worship, of self-realization? Deity worship. And is this method approved for us? No. In Kali Yuga, what is the life expectancy? 100 years maximum. What is the method of self-realization? Hearing and chanting of the holy name, fame, and pastimes of the Lord. Is this method recommended for us? Yes. So, I want to explain a little bit about, Prabhupada said life expectancy in Kali Yuga is maximum 100 years. So it will go down as Kali Yuga progresses. The life expectancy will decrease from 100 years eventually to 20 years. So here is an evidence from the journey of self-discovery. You can read it with me. Then in the next age, this Kali Yuga, we can live up to 100 years at the utmost. We're not living 100 years, but still the limit is 100 years. So just see, from 100 years, the average duration of life has decreased to about 70 years, and it will eventually decrease to the point where if a man lives for 20 to 30 years, he will be considered a very old man. So times are going to get tough. So we'll go back to the purport. The sages of Naimisaranya began this process in a place meant specifically for the devotees of the Lord. They prepared themselves to hear the pastimes of the Lord over a period of 1,000 years. So two things. One is from this excerpt. One is that Naimisaranya is meant specifically for the devotees, and we're going to find out why. And the other is that they had a very long Bhagavatam class. Their Bhagavatam class lasted for 1,000 years. So those are the two things I get from this. So this is an excerpt from Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 1, Text 1, Chapter 1, Text 4, where we can maybe get a little clue why the Naimisaranya is a place meant specifically for the devotees. So we can read the verse, the extract. In the Vayavya Tantra, it is said that Brahma, the engineering deity of this particular universe, contemplated within his mind a great wheel which may be turned round for the space of the universe, and thus the hub of the great circle is fixed at a particular place which is known as Naimisaranya. Similarly, there is another reference of the forest of Naimisaranya in the Braha Puranam, where it is stated that by performance of sacrifices at this place, the strength of demoniac people is curbed down, and thus people who are situated in the Brahminical culture do like this place of Naimisaranya for such performances. So we get two bits of information about Naimisaranya. One is that it's the hub of the universe, and the second, which is probably more pertinent to the reason why the sages did their sacrifice there, is that the energy of this place is such that it lends itself to the sacrifice. It gives the sacrifice devotees are doing more potency to counteract and to counteract the energy of demonic or evil-minded people. The very energy of Naimisaranya makes any sacrifice there done for good more effective. So that's how I understand it. So we're going to return to Prabhupada's purport on Canto 1, Chapter 1, Text 21, which is the verse we're talking on. By the example of these sages, one should learn that regular hearing and recitation of the Bhagavatam is the only way for self-realization. Other attempts are simply a waste of time, for they do not give any tangible results. So the sages walk their talk. They're constantly telling us the importance of hearing and discussing Bhagavatam. Throughout the Bhagavatam, we're going to hear this message many, many times. But not only do they tell us that, they act on that. Prabhupada is saying we can, just by their example, we should learn something. See that they're allocating 1,000 years to hearing and discussing Bhagavatam. They're not giving that time for deity worship or for meditation or for anything else. They're giving it for hearing, discussing Bhagavatam. Just that in itself is very instructive to us, Prabhupada is saying. So I just like to share some other evidences where, because another thing Prabhupada says in this purport is that we have to regularly hear and recite. So it's not enough just to go to Bhagavatam class and sit passively and hear it. We have to hear and speak. And that's why I'm encouraging you to read the purports with me, to read the evidences with me, to pause and say what you understood. Because not just here, but we have to repeat. Then the process works. So some evidences to emphasize the importance of hearing and reciting. This is an extract from Canto 1, Chapter 1, Text 6, purport. Srila Prabhupada writes, "To hear and explain them is more important than reading them. One can assimilate the knowledge of the revealed scriptures only by hearing and explaining. Hearing is called Shravana and explaining is called Kirtana. The two processes of Shravana and Kirtana are of primary importance to progressive spiritual life. Only one who has properly grasped the transcendental knowledge from the right source by submissive hearing can properly explain this subject." So Prabhupada is saying it's more important to hear and explain. This explanation of what we're hearing, so say what we've understood, that's called Kirtana. Hearing is called Shravanam, and then we explain the meaning, that's called Kirtana. That's what I'm doing now. I've heard something and I'm trying to explain what I understand it to mean. my explanation is called kirtana. If you pause the video and do the same thing, you'll be doing kirtana. So the next evidence about the importance of explaining what we've heard. This is from Canto 2, Chapter 2, Text 36, purport. Hearing is solidified by the process of chanting. One who has perfectly heard from the perfect source becomes convinced about the all-pervading personality of Godhead and thus becomes enthusiastic in glorifying the Lord. So hearing is solidified by the process of chanting. I understand chanting, obviously, we've heard from the previous verse, the previous excerpt means to explain, to hear and explain, that's the chanting. So when we explain the meaning of what we've heard, it is solidified. What do I understand Prabhupada means by solidified? We remember it, we assimilate it, we understand, we retain the subject matter, we comprehend it better, and we become more convinced of it. Another evidence on the same point from a lecture in 66. When we will learn something, we have to repeat it, even in material things, and what to speak of spiritual. So Prabhupada is saying, if you want to understand this, if you want to remember it, if you want to retain it, you have to repeat. That's the kirtanam part. It's not enough just to passively hear. That's not going to help us. So here's another evidence which I found very, very instructive. This is from a lecture Prabhupada gives in 1975. Let's read it together. So one who is spreading Krishna Upadesh, simply repeat what is said by Krishna, then you become acharya. Not difficult at all. Everything is stated there. We have to simply repeat, like parrot. Not exactly parrot. Parrot does not understand the meaning, he simply vibrates. But you should understand the meaning also, otherwise how you can explain. So it's very important that we explain Prabhupada's intended meaning in our own words. We're parrots in the sense that we don't add anything to what he's trying to say, and we don't subtract anything from what he's trying to say. We try to keep true to his intended meaning, but we put his intended meaning in our own words because that helps us to ensure that we're grasping meaning, that we're not just vibrating at the sound, we're not just like memorizing, but we don't understand the meaning. So I thought that was very instructive, that when we're repeating back, we have to explain it in our own words, not just repeat Prabhupada's own words, because if we can only repeat his words, that means we haven't really understood it. If we can't explain it in our own words, we haven't really grasped meaning. So a lot of emphasis is being put on hearing and explaining, but I was reading in Canto 1, Chapter 3, Text 44, that just hearing is not enough. Let's read this evidence from Canto 1, Chapter 3, Text 44. Simple hearing is not all. One must realize the text with proper attention. The word nivishta means that Sutta Goswami drank the juice of Bhagavatam through his ears. That is the real process of receiving Bhagavatam. One should hear with rapt attention from the real person, and then he can at once realize the presence of Lord Krishna in every page. The secret of knowing Bhagavatam is mentioned here. No one can give rapt attention who is not pure in mind. No one can be pure in mind who is not pure in action. No one can be pure in action who is not pure in eating, sleeping, fearing, and mating. But somehow or other, if someone hears with rapt attention from the right person at the very beginning, one can assuredly see Lord Sri Krishna in person in the pages of the Bhagavatam. I remember reading this and thinking, God, what chance do I have? If I'm not pure in my habits, I'm not pure in my behavior, I'm not pure in my mind, the hearing is not going to help me. And we can see that oftentimes we're listening to Bhagavatam class, and it may be happening to you right now, and our mind zones out, and we're suddenly thinking about something else, or we're reading ourselves, and we're reading 2-3 pages, and our mind completely zones out. After 2-3 pages, we think, what have I just read? So that kind of hearing is not going to help us. We have to be hearing with rapt attention. But Prabhupada saying rapt attention is hard if your mind's not pure. So I was contemplating what's the answer to this when I was listening to Prabhupada lecture and I heard this excerpt. So let's read this evidence from a lecture in 1976. Generally, people cannot understand. But if one understands, he becomes liberated. If some way or other, it is not very difficult. Simply we have to associate with devotees and discuss this literature. Then we will understand Krishna very easily. So the way we can avoid zoning out is we discuss. If we discuss it, we remain present. We have to repeat what we're understanding. If we have to repeat what our discussion partner is saying, we remain present, alert. So going back to Prabhupada's purport, Lord Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu preached this system of Bhagavat-dharma, and he recommended that all those who are born in India should take the responsibility of broadcasting the messages of Lord Sri Krishna, primarily the message of Bhagavad-Gita. And when one is well established in the teachings of the Bhagavad-Gita, he can take up the study of Srimad Bhagavatam for further enlightenment and self-realization. So a few things from this section of the purport. One is that this hearing and recitation of the Bhagavatam is called Bhagavat-dharma. That's what it's called. And we're being told that Lord Chaitanya recommended those people, those Vaishnavas who were his contemporaries in India, that they teach this to people all over the world. Normally the Vaishnavas used to live in India, and Lord Chaitanya is saying to them, you know how to hear and discuss Gita and Bhagavatam. You please teach other people how to hear and discuss Bhagavatam effectively, so that they can achieve self-realization. So I understand that the instruction is really broader than just to people who live in India. This instruction is meant for anyone who knows how to hear and discuss Gita and Bhagavatam in an effective way. Lord Chaitanya is saying, please teach other people how to effectively discuss these two books. And Prabhupada is also telling us in this little extract that to hear and discuss Bhagavad Gita is as important as hearing and discussing Bhagavatam. In fact, it's the preliminary study of the Bhagavatam. It's what we need to understand Bhagavad Gita if we're going to understand Bhagavatam correctly. So I understand that's why Prabhupada instituted the morning Bhagavatam and the evening Gita class every single day, because these two books really need to both be understood. Just a little bit of information. This term Bhagavat-dharma has got two synonyms. Sometimes it's referred to as Bhagavat-vidhi, sometimes as Bhagavat-marg. And I've put the canto, chapter, verse where these terms are used and translated on the slide in front of you. But all these three terms, Bhagavat-dharma, Bhagavat-vidhi, and Bhagavat-marg, are used synonymously, and they're all referring to the same activity of hearing and discussing Srimad Bhagavatam and Bhagavad Gita. So I have three questions from this after understanding Prabhupada's purport. The first question is that sometimes we hear the term Pancaratrika vidhi marg used as well as Bhagavat-vidhi. So what do these two terms mean, and what is their relationship to one another? The second question is, if deity worship is not recommended for Kali Yuga, then why do we Vaishnavas do deity worship in the temples? And the third is, we hear the Harinama, Harinama, Harinama Eva Kevalam, that the only way, the truth, the light is to chant the holy name. That's why we do so many kirtan melas and kirtan festivals. So now we're being told that no, the key is hearing and discussing Gita and Bhagavatam. So which is it, the holy name or Gita and Bhagavatam? So these three questions I'd like to just discuss. So the first thing is just to understand what is Pancaratrika vidhi and what is its relationship to Bhagavat-vidhi. So here is an evidence from Canto 4, Chapter 13, Text 4. There are two different ways of approaching the Supreme Lord. One is called Bhagavat-marg, or the way of Srimad Bhagavatam, and the other is called Pancaratrika vidhi. Pancaratrika vidhi is the method of temple worship, and Bhagavat-vidhi is the system of 9 processes which begin with hearing and chanting. The Krishna consciousness movement accepts both processes simultaneously and thus enables one to make steady progress on the path of realization of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. This Pancaratrika procedure was first introduced by the great sage Narad, as referred to here by Vidura. So, very interesting point. One is we're being told Pancaratrika Vidhi means temple worship, and the other is we're being told that it was introduced by Narada Muni. So, let's carry on. Here is another evidence from teachings of Lord Kapila. It is recommended that the neophyte meditate on the deity daily. He should begin by meditating on the lotus feet, and then when he's practiced, he should turn his gaze toward Krishna's smiling face. The neophyte should also read and hear Bhagavad-gita and Srimad Bhagavatam. If we simply try to see and don't listen, the results will not be permanent. In some temples, there are deities but no discussion about Krishna. People attend for some time, but after a while they lose interest. Thus there must be two activities. The deity must be worshipped, and this is called Pancaratrika Vidhi. There must also be Bhagavat-vidhi, reading Srimad Bhagavad-gita and Srimad Bhagavatam. Pancaratrika Vidhi and Bhagavat-vidhi go hand in hand. By participating in these two processes, the neophyte can gradually attain the intermediate stage. So now we're being told that Pancaratrika Vidhi is not just temple worship, but it's a very specific type of temple worship called deity worship, which ties into our second question. That the verse the purport we're just studying says that deity worship is not recommended for the sage. So, but we'll discuss that in a little while. But we're being told that Pancaratrika Vidhi is deity worship. And another thing we're being told is that if you do deity worship but you don't do Bhagavat-vidhi, it won't work. We'll lose interest. It will not achieve self-realization. That deity worship will only be effective if it's accompanied by Bhagavat-vidhi, hearing and discussing of these two books, Gita and Bhagavatam. So, another very interesting evidence, this is from a lecture Prabhupada gives in 1971. Tamal Krishna Maharaj asked Prabhupada, you said, when you were speaking of Bhagavat-vidhi, you said that of the 9 devotional methods it includes, I didn't understand which ones it includes, up to what point. Prabhupada, Shravanam, Kirtanam, Smaranam. This is Bhagavat Marg. And Archanam, Vandanam, Dasyam, Sakyam, Atma Nivedanam, that is Pancaratrika Archanam. So we have now a very clear understanding about what is Bhagavat-vidhi and what is Pancaratrika Vidhi. Of the 9 angas of bhakti, which are described in Canto 7, Chapter 5, Text 23, the first 3 are Bhagavat Marg, Shravanam, Kirtanam, Smaranam. To hear, to discuss or chant, and by hearing and discussing, assimilating, remembering, retaining, Smaranam. That's Bhagavat Marg. And the rest of it, Vandanam, Archanam, prayers, deity worship, serving the lotus feet, service, all of that is deity worship. Pancaratrika Vidhi. So this brings us to the second question, is that we read in the purport of Canto 1, Chapter 1, Text 21, that deity worship is not recommended for Kali Yuga. It's the recommended method of Dwapara Yuga. So why do we do deity worship? So my light is that the Pancaratrika Vidhi that we do is not the same as the deity worship that they did in Dwapara Yuga. This deity worship that we do, Pancaratrika Vidhi, is not the standard of the Vedas. It's the standard which was given to us by Narada Muni. Narada Muni started this system. It's not exactly the system that they would follow from the Vedas. So my evidence, this is the beginning of a few slides which give an evidence. In this age, Pancaratrika Vidhi, not Vedic. Vedic is very, very strict. Unless one is born by a Brahmin father, he's not given the advantage of becoming a Brahmana. That is Vedic Vidhi. But Pancaratrika Vidhi means although he's not born of a Brahmin family, he has got a little tendency to become a Brahmana. Brahmana means Brahma Janati Iti Brahmana, one who is inquisitive to understand Brahman. Brahmeti Paramatmeti Bhagavan Iti Shabjate. He should be given chance. Just like there is a little fire, fan it. Fanning, fanning, fanning. And it becomes a big fire. So our process is that. So just a few things. When Prabhupada says not Vedic, he means not the deity worship which was recommended in the Vedas. That deity worship was only allowed to be performed by Brahmins born in Brahmin families, properly trained from birth, where they had a heritage. Their heritage was to be very pure. That only they could keep that standard of deity worship. Prabhupada is saying this, what we do now is anyone who's a little interested in self-realization, is at a lower standard, and any one of us can do it if we take to the process of trying to understand Brahman's self-realization. So carry on reading from the same extract. Anyone we pick up, anyone, Kirata, Hunandra, Pulinda, Pulaksha, what to speak of the Shudra, Striya, Shudra, Tata, Vaishya. In the ordinary way, the Stri, woman, Shudra, the fourth grade man of Vaishya, they are taken together, not very intelligent. But Pancaratrika Vidhi offers facility even persons who are lower than these, Striya, Shudra, Vaishya, Kirata, Hunandra, Pulinda, Pulaksha, Abira, Shumba, Yavana, Kasajya, Ye, Necha, Papa. And less than that, Ye, Necha, Papa, Yat, Apashraya, Shraya, Yat, Apashraya, Raya. A devotee, a pure devotee of the Lord. And if these persons take shelter of a pure devotee of the Lord, then Shujanti, they become purified by following the injunction of the spiritual master. He knows how to deal with them, how to elevate them to the Brahminical position, so that is not artificial. We'll go to the next slide. Shastra says, Bhagavat says, yes, by such expert management, these Kirata Hunandra, lower than the Shudras, Sujanti. Now, just like people protest, because we are giving the position of a Brahman to the Mlechas, Yavana Kasajya. Kasadaya means Mongolians, the Chinese, Japanese, and the Philippines. So they are Kasadaya. The Manipuris, Assamese, they are considered as Kasadaya. So there is no distinction. Chaitanya Mahaprabhu has given open declaration, Krishna Bhajante Nahi, Jati Kuladi Vichara. Anyone who's desirous of becoming Krishna conscious, it is open. Anyone can come. Sometimes Prabhupada is accused of being racist, but he's not a racist. The Vedas are comparing anyone in Kali Yuga, all of us Europeans, Americans, Chinese, Japanese, women, laborers, we're all considered very low class people. Our habits are very low class. In comparison to who? In comparison to the very high class purified sages of Naimisaranya. But we're being told, Lord Chaitanya is saying anyone, it doesn't matter how low class our habits were, if we take guidance from a pure devotee, we can all become purified and achieve self-realization. So this is the end of this excerpt, which is from a lecture Prabhupada gives in 75. By proper training by the expert spiritual master, everyone can be raised to the Brahminical platform and then Vaishnava platform. So, if we're properly trained, so what is the training? Anyone in the entire world, even down to the Chandala, who lives by cooking and eating the flesh of dog, is immediately purified if he takes bath and hearing through the ear the glorification of my name, fame, etc. This is an extract from Bhagavatam, Canto 3, Chapter 16, Text 6, purport. So this is taking us right back to Bhagavat-vidhi. How do we become purified? By hearing about Krishna's name, fame, glories, etc., associates, by hearing about Krishna. So that takes us back to Bhagavat Marg. Then we become purified and we can engage in Pancaratrika Vidhi. So here's another evidence from a lecture Prabhupada gives in 1972. But the Bhakti Yoga can be kept active by Shravanam Kirtanam. Just like you are hearing, I am speaking. This is Kirtanam and you are hearing. Both we are benefiting. Shravanam Kirtanam Vishnu, Smaranam Padasevanam, Archanam Vandanam Dasyam, Sakyam Atma Nivedanam. These are the 9 different procedures of Bhakti Yoga. The first thing is Shravanam. If we simply keep these deities here, we may see, but if we don't hear about him, then it will be hackneyed. Just like in India it has become, because they have given up the process of Shravanam Kirtanam, therefore they are feeling now. So Prabhupada is saying, as far as I understand, that if you just do deity worship, but you minimize or neglect the hearing and discussion of Gita and Bhagavatam, then your deity worship will become hackneyed. So let's look at what the dictionary definition of hackneyed is. Made commonplace or trite, stale, banal. So if I was to put that in my own words, not only will we lose our taste for it, it will become boring, but it'll actually become mundane, commonplace. It'll become a material activity. It won't have spiritual potency if we're not hearing and discussing, and we won't experience enlivenment from it if we're not hearing and discussing Gita and Bhagavatam. So, the key message that I am really is coming across to me, and I you know, if you would agree, is that the importance of the Bhagavatam and the Gita class. They're absolutely important. That we really have to use these 2 times of the day, these 2 parts of our sadhana, of our spiritual practices, the morning Bhagavatam class and the evening Gita class, that they're the very engine that drives our spiritual advancement. Without giving adequate time and energy and making sure these 2 parts of our sadhana are done very effectively, that our deity worship and every other aspect of our sadhana is not going to be very effective. Because these 2 parts of the day are the Bhagavat-vidhi part, and every other part of our day is the Pancaratrika part of our sadhana. So these it's essential that we really allocate sufficient time, energy and attention to making these 2 parts of our day, Bhagavatam class and Gita class, as effective as possible. So some evidences which I hope will support my light. I am very much stressing at this point that all of my students should be very much conversant with the philosophy of Krishna consciousness, and that they should read our books very diligently, at least 1 or 2 hours daily, and try to understand the subject matter from varieties of angles. So Prabhupada is saying, I'm stressing it. He's saying, and what is he stressing? He's saying, give minimum, not maximum, minimum 1 or 2 hours to this Bhagavat-vidhi, to hearing and discussing Gita and Bhagavatam. And he's saying, the way I understand it, don't make it a monologue. Give yourself adequate opportunity so there can be different perspectives. Devotees can see it from different angles of vision. And another thing I'm understanding is that we should read it very diligently, very carefully. So at least 1 or 2 hours minimum. Let's go to another evidence. This is a letter Prabhupada wrote to His Holiness Satsvarupa Goswami again in 1972. You mention you like to speak now very often, but the first business should be to preach to the devotees. It is better to maintain a devotee than to try to convince others to become devotees. It is the duty of the GBC to maintain the devotees, keep them in the highest standard of Krishna consciousness, and give them all good instruction, and let them go out and preach for making more devotees. Your first job should be to make sure that every one of the devotees in your zone of management is reading regularly our literatures and discussing the subject matter seriously from different angles of seeing, and that they are somehow or other absorbing the knowledge of Krishna consciousness philosophy. If they are fully educated in our philosophy, and if they can get all of the knowledge and study it from every viewpoint, then very easily they will perform tapasya or renunciation, and that will be their advancement in Krishna consciousness. So first thing is to instruct all of your temple presidents and the other devotees to read daily, just as we have done in our morning class in Los Angeles. You may remember that we're reading 1 shloka every morning in Sanskrit and reciting it all together, and then discussing it thoroughly by seeing different new things. So you introduce this system and train the devotees first. Don't be too much concerned for the time being with non-devotees. Now we must fix up what devotees we have got in knowledge of Krishna consciousness. Then we will succeed. What good are many, many devotees if none of them are knowledgeable? So a few things strike me very, very kind of clearly from this extract. One is we're not going to succeed if we don't give enough emphasis to training our devotees in Bhagavat Marg and hearing and discussing from different angles of vision, both the Gita and Bhagavatam. If we put all our focus on making new devotees, but we don't give adequate time and energy and attention to making sure the devotees we already have, who already have some faith, are really discussing from different angles of vision, Gita and Bhagavatam, and really participating in discussions and assimilating the subject matter, then we're not going to succeed. If we want to succeed, we really have to emphasize this activity. That's the message that comes across very clearly to me. So here's another evidence from a lecture Prabhupada gives in 1975. So that means devotees who are interested in Bhagavad Bhakti, to understand Bhagavan, they should read Srimad Bhagavatam in the association. We should have regular classes, just like school and colleges, 8 hour, 6 hour. Be engaged always in reading Srimad Bhagavatam, discussing amongst yourself, then you'll make progress. Otherwise, if you take it as an official routine work, you should take as routine work, but with consciousness that we have to learn something. Not simply attending the class, but to learn something. In this way, make your life successful. Because after all, everything is being done Deva Choditat, impelled by the Supreme Person. The Supreme Person is behind everything. So in the association of devotees, if we read Srimad Bhagavatam regularly, then our material contamination will be dissolved and our spiritual consciousness will come out, and that will make our life successful. So a few things. This is 975. In 72, Prabhupada said minimum 1 to 2 hours. In 75, he's encouraging us, up it. Invest, he says, 6 to 8 hours of your day to discussing Gita and Bhagavatam. And he's saying if you do this, you will make advancement, you will progress, we will succeed. And then he's giving his reasoning that we will succeed in our mission and everything. His reasoning is because after all, everything is being done Deva Choditat. So let us look at what Deva Choditat means. Deva Choditat. In Bhagavatam, Canto 3, Chapter 20, Text 13, in the word for word, Prabhupada translates Deva Choditat as impelled by superior authority. And in a lecture on the Srimad Bhagavatam in 75, this is what Prabhupada says about Deva Choditat. So this is the way of physical manifestation of different ways. But on the background there is Deva Choditat. Everything is coming into existence on account of superior management or superior impelling. That is the main proposition, that Maya Dakshena Prakriti, Bhagavad Gita 9.10. These things, we, physical transformation, different ways we experience, that is the phenomenal world. But these things are taking place not automatically, but Deva Choditat, by superior intervention, impelled by the superior personality of Godhead. So the way I understand Prabhupada's intention for the last evidence we read, where he was urging us to allocate 6 to 8 hours of our time to hearing and discussing Gita and Bhagavatam, he's saying, don't think you're not going to get anywhere in your other projects. If you make time for doing the most important sacrifice, the most important activity in this day of Kali, in this age of Kali, the most important activity which pleases Krishna, which is Bhagavat-vidhi, which is to hear and discuss Gita and Bhagavatam, if you make time for that, in other areas of life you'll succeed, because everything else depends on the authority of the devas. If Krishna is pleased, his agents, the demigods, will make sure that your projects or your other concerns will work out well. And if we minimize or neglect giving adequate time and energy and attention to hearing and discussing Gita and Bhagavatam, then we may work very, very hard. 8 hours, 10 hours, 12 hours, 24 hours in the day. But if we're not pleasing Krishna, then the devas will not cooperate and we will not succeed in anything we're doing. So he's reminding us that, don't just work hard like asses. Make sure you make time for doing the activity which pleases Krishna, because your success in everything else depends on pleasing Krishna. And this Bhagavat-vidhi, this hearing and discussing of Gita and Bhagavatam, really pleases Krishna. It's the way we please Krishna in this age of Kali. So, so we had another question, which was that, that the third question I wanted to discuss, which is that a lot of emphasis is put on Harinam, 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 Eva Kevalam, Kalo, Nasteva, 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 Gatir, and Yata. That is just the holy name, just the holy name. And in ISKCON we put a lot of emphasis now on the holy name. We have long kirtans, Nam kirtans, kirtan festivals. So should we be putting all this emphasis on the holy name, or should we be giving a little bit more emphasis to hearing, discussing Gita and Bhagavatam? Which is it? So I'd like to just look at some evidences, look at this question a little bit. So this is an extract from Bhagavatam, Canto 7, Chapter 5, text 23 to 24. Hearing from the text of Srimad Bhagavatam is considered the most important process of hearing. In Srimad Bhagavatam, great devotees like Shukadev Goswami have specifically described Lord Krishna's holy name, form and qualities. Unless one hears about the holy name, form and qualities of the Lord, one cannot clearly understand the other processes of devotional service. So what I'm getting from this is that hearing and discussing Gita and Bhagavatam are even more important than chanting, having kirtan festivals, because if we don't properly understand the Gita and Bhagavatam, then we will not know how to chant properly. Chanting properly is not just a matter of having the nice musical effects. There's something more to chanting properly that we will not be able to grasp if we don't hear and discuss Gita and Bhagavatam properly. So what is it that really makes the difference to chanting properly? So here's an extract from a lecture Prabhupada gives in 72. There are 3 stages of chanting Hare Krishna. The first stage is Nam Aparad, offensive. The second stage is Nam Abhas, and the third stage is Shuddhanam. Generally, in the beginning we are offensive. Therefore, 10 kinds of offences should be avoided. In the period of Nam Abhas, one becomes liberated. And when he chants Shuddhanam, he directly sees Krishna and enjoys his company, just like Haridas Thakur, Jagannath Das Babaji used to do. So, if we're not liberated, if we're still experiencing suffering, anxiety, fear, we're not chanting Nam Abhas. If we're not directly seeing Krishna, we're not chanting Shuddhanam. We're chanting Nam Aparad. So, chanting Nam Aparad is not going to help us. If we want to stop chanting Nam Aparad and at least achieve liberation from suffering, we have got to hear and discuss Gita and Bhagavatam. What to speak if we want to chant Shuddhanam and see Krishna? That requires that we put some little bit more emphasis and energy and time in hearing and discussing Gita and Bhagavatam properly. So here is a little evidence from the Prema Bhagavata by Srila Jagadananda Pandit. My dear brothers, a person cannot purely chant Krishna Nam in the company of non-devotees. The sound and the syllables may be uttered, but that is not real chanting. Chanting in this manner is at best Nam Abhas, because chanting in bad association is always mixed with Nam Aparad. Dear brother, kindly understand these kinds of chanting, Nam Aparad and Nam Abhas, are detrimental to spiritual progress and cannot be considered pure Krishna Bhakti. Whoa, detrimental. If you really desire Krishna Nam purely, earnestly seek Sadhu Sanga, the company of the pure devotees of Sri Krishna. Reject all unwanted cravings for sense enjoyment, liberation, mystic powers, and other material desires. So, Sadhu Sangha, company of the pure devotees of Sri Krishna, that association is there in the Bhagavatam. We're associating not just with the rishis of Naimisaranya, Sutta Goswami, King Pariksit, Shukadev Goswami, Maitreya Rishi, Vidura, Lord Brahma, Narada Muni. We're associating with all these pure devotees, and not only that, but we're associating with Srila Prabhupada in his purports. That is direct association. When we try to hear and assimilate his teachings, we're associating with them. This kind of association will enable our chanting to come gradually to the stage of Shuddhanam. So, and yes, just another thing too, if we don't study Prabhupada's books, we were hearing about Nam Aparad. If we don't study Srila Prabhupada's books, that is a form of aparad, because one of the offenses to the holy name is Guru Avagya, to neglect the orders of the spiritual master. So in this lecture in 1974, Srila Prabhupada says, your Guru is writing books. If you think there is no necessity of reading books, that is Guru Avagya. Do you mean to say I'm writing these books whole night for selling and making money? Why do you think like that? So these books are primarily for the faithful. We hear and discuss them, then we go and plant the seed of faith in other people's hearts by giving them the books. But if people, having received the books, come and then they're not trained how to hear and discuss them, then that seed will not fructify and develop into love of God. We must make sure that those who are already faithful are watering this seed of faith. So my light is that without this hearing and discussing of Gita and Bhagavatam, our chanting of the holy names cannot progress to Shuddhanam, and that is why hearing and discussing Gita and Bhagavatam is essential if we want to chant the holy name properly. Now, how do we know if we're doing sufficient hearing and chanting of the holy name, if we're giving sufficient attention to this hearing and discussing of the Gita and the Bhagavatam? Here is an excerpt from a lecture Srila Prabhupada gives in 1968. He says, if a person is actually executing devotional service, then he must be happy. If he's not happy, then he's not doing properly. So, if in our family life we're not happy, we're not giving sufficient attention to making sure that as a family we come together morning and evening and hearing, discuss Gita and Bhagavatam. If we do this, then gradually we'll see that our family life will become happier. If in the temple, if our temple residents are not happy, if there's politics or depression or a temple devotee is not doing well, it's because they're not getting adequate opportunity for hearing and discussing Gita and Bhagavatam. If we give them more opportunity and more support in doing that activity, then they will become happy and they will gradually make progress and they will become a very effective and blissful member of the temple. So for more information about how we can make our discussion of Srila Prabhupada's books, Gita and Bhagavatam specifically, how we can make this Bhagavat-vidhi, our practice of Bhagavat-vidhi, more effective, I invite you to look at our webpage, Improving Our Sadhu Sanga. The URL is improvingsanga.wordpress.com. Thank you very much. Hare Krishna.